Good afternoon and welcome to this Governance for Schools Wellbeing webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to be delivering today's workshop presentation on sport premium funding, as well as some input from Little Common Primary School on how they have developed their physical activity provision in the school. Before we get started, just a little bit of admin for everyone attending and not in some ways. As ever, you can access the slides we'll be using in the panel in GoToWebinar, and we'll also be sharing them after the event once we've uploaded the video. And please do share the link to the video and slides you have with any particular party you think might be interested, be that the other members of your board or indeed leadership at your school. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of value for them to find therein. We're really excited and grateful to be supported today by some fabulous collaborative partners who are going to share their expertise with us. We have David Taylor from Active Sussex, Linda Appleby and Katie Chapman from Little Common Primary. So just a little bit about them. Active Partnerships, who we've been working with during this phase of our wellbeing campaign. As a part of Sport England, there are 43 active partnerships across England who work collaboratively with local partners to create the conditions for an active nation using the power of sport and physical activity to transform lives. Active Sussex specifically, as the name suggests, is the active partnership in Sussex. Their main aim is to increase participation in sport and physical activity at a local level. David Taylor works with primary schools across the county to support the development of their PE, school sport and physical activity provision, including the effective and sustainable spending of the primary PE and sport premium. Little Common Primary School is a large urban school of 600 pupils in Bexhill-on-Sea. It has 21 classes, but only one playground, one field, and one hall large enough for PE lessons. Despite that, is an award-winning school when it comes to their physical activity provision in numerous ways. Linda Appleby has been a head teacher and executive head teacher for 16 years. She has led large urban schools and a small village school. She spends a lot of her time working with schools and leaders to develop educational provision. Katie Chapman has been a teacher for 16 years. She's a full-time class teacher and has successfully led PE at Little Common for the last 6 years. So our thanks to them. And without further ado, I would like to hand over to David. Please take us away.
Brilliant, thank you, Matthew. First of all, just want to thank everyone for attending today. It's an area that I'm really very passionate about, and I've seen firsthand how important it is for pupils at schools today. So it's lovely to see so many of you here and wanting to find out a little bit more. Can we go on to the next slide, please? So just a little bit about me before we start. As Matthew's already said, I'm the Primary PE and School Sports Officer at Active Sussex. My details are on the screen there if any of you want to contact me afterwards. So in my previous role before whilst working for Active Sussex, I spent 8 years working in a primary school, and my job there was as a PE coordinator. I also have a wife who is a primary school teacher, so I'm fairly well versed in this area. Also on that slide, I've added a list to the other local active partnerships who will have a similar representative such as me for the county that you are in. So if you want to find out who to contact in your area, please use that link. But I think we're all here really because we know that being more active will allow us to lead a longer, happier and healthier life. And it's really quite as simple as that. Okay, next slide, please. So just to go over what we're going to look at during this webinar. So there's 4 areas. First area is we're looking at what is the primary PE and sports premium. And then we'll look at what role do governors have within the premium. And then finally, how governors can assist the spending, monitoring and evaluating of the premium. I'll then hand you over to Little Common Primary School, who Matthew's just introduced, and they're going to be describing what impact the premium has had at their school, how they've used the premium, and also a little bit about how they work with their school governor in terms of using the premium and some recent Ofsted inspection experience as well that they have had, including a deep dive into PE, which will be useful to you. Okay, next slide, please. So throughout the webinar, just putting a few tasks just to break up me speaking for the whole time, and just to give you a little time to consolidate and reflect really on what I've been speaking about. It's also an opportunity for you to add any questions into that question function, so there will be a little time at the end for us to answer any questions that have come to you. So for each task, I've just set out a question for you to have a think about. The first one is obviously up on the screen. The average school has now received £100,000 funding through the primary PE and sport premium. Do you know how this has been used at your school? So obviously that's, for a primary school, that's quite a significant amount of money just to use on one area. So that's, I'm just going to give you sort of 20, 30 seconds to have a think about that for your school and to write any notes down that you need to at this point. Okay, can we go on to the next slide, please? So as I mentioned, section 1, we're going to be looking at what is the primary PE and sport premium. Next slide. So this is an annual ring-fence grant. It has to be used to develop PE, sport and physical activity within your school. At the minute, this year, schools will have received £16,000 plus £10 per pupil in years 1 to 6. So an average school receives around £18,000 per year. And this is provided to your school in 2 instalments. They're normally around October and April time. And it has to be used to provide additional and sustainable improvements to your PE, school sport and physical activity provision. Those 2 words are quite key really. So for additional, I mean anything that's additional to what you would normally offer or additional to national curriculum requirements. And for sustainable, I suppose we mean it will benefit pupils at your school in future years. So there, as I said, there are 2 key bits that the funding must be used to cover. Okay, next slide, please. So looking at why is this money been provided to schools to be used in this way? So, I mean, the evidence to suggest schools should be more active is growing day on day. And at an event in January, I was at, Jenny Harris, quite a lot of you I'd imagine will recognise now, she's the Deputy Chief Medical Officer, used a very small talk that she was involved with to highlight that physical activity is the single most important thing to do to improve your mental and physical health. I think that's quite important that she, in just a short time, she was quite keen to put that message across of just how important physical activity is, especially when you consider obviously everything that's gone on in the last year and a half, that she wanted to make that point about physical activity. And that kind of adds into a previous quote from the Chief Medical Officer that if physical activity were a drug, we refer to it as a miracle cure. And I'll try to clarify a few of those points. So if you go on to the next slide. So if you just look now at sort of one area that's obviously related to physical activity, and that is excess weight amongst children. So this is a graphic from 2016-17, and it just shows you that in reception class, when pupils start school, 1 in 5 are classified as either being overweight or obese. And as you go through primary school, that only gets worse, unfortunately. So by the time you reach year 6, an average school will have 1 in 3 of its pupils will be either overweight or obese. So in an average class of 30, 10 of those pupils is going to be either overweight or obese, which is quite a shocking statistic when you think of it like that. Unfortunately, I mean, the latest statistics I have are from 2018. Statistics haven't changed from that date, and unfortunately, we think it potentially could have got worse given the impacts of COVID. So, yes, that's where we are at the moment. Next slide, please. So, being obese is quite harmful to children and young people in a number of ways. There's 4 kind of picked out here. So it's not just the physical benefits, the physical disadvantages that we can see on there of high cholesterol, high blood pressure, bone and joint problems, breathing difficulties, but there also are effects, mental effects as well. So emotional and behavioural, we can see on there the stigmatisation, bullying, low self-esteem, all directly related to being obese. And again, there is a strong correlation between obesity and school absence. And unfortunately, we know that being obese as a child increases the risk of you becoming overweight and obese as an adult. And I mean, just put that into perspective, sedentary behaviour pre-pandemic cost the NHS approximately £5 billion per year. Next slide, please. So finally, if we look at the importance of physical activities from a school's point of view, these are all picked out directly from the Department for Education's website. So they want schools to be more active. They, as I mentioned before, there is growing evidence day on day that it's such a vital important part of pupils' lives at primary school. So yeah, they've listed those 7 benefits there. There's physical health benefits, mental well-being benefits. Pupils are happier when they're more active, they're more resilient, they're more trusting of their peers, their behaviour improves, and I mean, ultimately, if you've got a well child who's happy, their academic achievement will be enhanced. So again, another direct link to being more active is enhanced academic achievement. Next slide, please. So if I haven't convinced you already, I've added a link to a video on there, which will, it's just a very short 3-minute video by a doctor who runs through, in layman's terms, why being active is important for pupils within a school setting. And his key tagline, as you can see on there, that active children make strong students. If you want to know more in this area, it's quite obviously a large area. There's lots of research done in this area. The resources on the Government Schools website, and also the first webinar they did around physical activity last term, will go into a lot more detail around this area of why being active at school is really, really important. Okay, next slide, please. So if you cut back to the premium itself, it has 5 key indicators. So the use of the funding, they expect schools to see improvements across these 5 areas. I'm just going to run through sort of each of them and just give you a little bit more detail. So key indicator 1, the engagement of all pupils in regular physical activity. So the key bits to pick up there is all pupils. It is for every pupil. It's sort of tackling those difficulties in your less active pupils and making this available for everyone. And the last sort of areas, physical activities, are some terminology, I suppose, that needs just to look at a little bit more closely. So physical activity, it's not just your PE lessons, it's not just your after school clubs, it's all those parts of the day where pupils can access physical activities. That might be active travel, coming to school, walking or on their bike. It might be making sure playtimes are as active as possible. It may be that you introduce activity into your lessons. So can you make your maths lessons active? Can you make your English lessons active? So there's lots of physical activity. Don't just think of PE, think about all those different areas where pupils have the opportunity to be active. So second key indicator, sorry, I can go back to the second key indicator. The profile of PE and sport is raised across the school as a tool for whole school improvement. So this, I mean, an easy way to look at this would be to look at your school improvement plan and to see which areas can this premium contribute to. So if you have an issue with attendance, how can you use this PE and sport premium to support that? Could you find out what clubs the pupils who don't attend your school well, what they would like to do to support that? Could you put clubs on at the beginning of the day to support pupils to ensure that they are in school because they want to attend the club? So there's lots of different ways. So it's really quite a key way is to link this premium to your school improvement plan. Key indicator number 3, the increased confidence, knowledge and skills of all staff in teaching PE and sport. So we know this is the only guarantee pupils will have at school, be an active is in those PE lessons. And unfortunately, the training teachers get within their teacher training is not always and as much as they could need in terms of their PE and sport development. So could this funding be used to upskill those teachers, which is a great sustainable way of using the premium, because it will ensure obviously pupils in future years will have just a really good experience of PE and sport at your school. Fourth key indicator, a broader experience of a range of sports and activities. Again, that is quite crucial to offer that broad experience to ensure that every pupil finds something that they like and that they enjoy and that they can continue on participating in future years. And finally, increased participation in competitive sport. And when we talk about competitive sport, I think a lot of people just think back to when they were at school. They think back to you know, the football tournaments, the football matches, netball matches, but it's broader than that now, and it's an area that's continuously developing at the moment. But it could be competitive sport could be just looking at your personal best. Is there an activity that you want to get better at to beat yourself, to compete against yourself? So there's lots of different ways to promote those values of competition within pupils rather than just a team match or a team game at some point. Okay, can we move on to the next slide? So some more key information about the premium. So there's some do's and don'ts on there. Obviously the greens are the do's, and they are, as I've mentioned, that you must use it to make additional and sustainable improvements. So just to reiterate them again, additional is anything extra to what you're already offering, and sustainable to benefit those pupils in years to come at your school. But there are some don'ts as well. So in the red, we can see it should not be used to cover PPA arrangements. The PPA is the planning, preparation and assessment time that all teachers get, normally on a weekly basis. So it can't be used to cover that time. It can't be used to teach the minimum requirements of the national curriculum. And finally, it cannot be used to fund capital expenditure. And just to clarify what capital expenditure would cover, the quote that we've received from the Department for Education is that the DfE does not set the capitalisation policy for each school, and that school business managers, accountants and their auditors are best placed to advise on a school's agreed capitalisation policy. So you need to refer back to your school as to what would be classified as capital expenditure and what wouldn't be. Because obviously schools do receive a capital budget to spend on those items. Next slide, please. Okay, so just some more key information. To meet grant conditions, every school that receives the premium must report on their spending, and that report must be put on your school's website by the end of the summer term or by July the 31st this year at the very latest. And that report must include those four following things. It must have the amount of premium received, and that's across the academic year, not across the financial year. A full breakdown of how it's been spent, the impact that your school has seen, and this is the impact on pupils. So the impact on their participation in activities and the impact on their attainment through obviously what they've been learning in PE. And finally, how those improvements will be sustainable in the future. So all four of those things must be on that report to meet grant conditions. Next slide. So additionally, the report must now also include 3 statistics around this swimming provision, swimming outcomes for pupils at your school. So for your year 6 pupils, the report must include the percentage that can swim confidently and proficiently over 25 meters, the percentage of them that can use a range of strokes effectively, and the percentage that can perform a safe self-rescue in different situations. all three of those are taken directly from the national curriculum, so most schools will be aware of them. Next slide. To ensure that you do meet those grant conditions and you include all of those items, there is a premium template, a reporting template that's been created by AFP and Youth Sport Trust. It's also been commissioned by the Department for Education. It's completely free to download. The image on that side is actually a link to the template, and we strongly recommend that any school who's looking to report uses that template, again, just to ensure they meet grant conditions. Next slide, please. I'm just going to give you a quick 20-second break from me talking. There's just a question on the screen now. What do you think your role should be to ensure this premium has the greatest impact on pupils at your school? Again, if you have any questions, now would be a good time to add them to the question function. Okay, can we go on to the next slide, please? Okay, so moving on to section 2, what role do governors have? So this slide shows the 4 areas that cover governance in the current inspection framework. I'm just going to run through each of those points. So those responsible for governance understand their role and carry this out effectively. Now, obviously, an important part of that is you attending training sessions like you are today. So obviously, this would be a good one to inform you around this area. They ensure that the provider has a clear vision and strategy and that resources are managed well. Most schools will produce a plan of how they're going to spend their premium. So that would be an ideal way of looking at that vision. But also you may want to consider looking at the school's vision for PE and physical activity generally, and how they fit in with the school's overall vision. Third point, governors hold leaders to account for the quality of education or training. So could you look at your the PE lessons at your school, or if you have used, or the school has used this premium for CPD on staff, how impactful was it? How effective was it? Has that led to an improvement in the quality of education within PE at the school? So there's sort of things that you could be looking at as a governor. And finally, those with responsibility for governance ensure that the provider fulfills its statutory duties. And I suppose with regards to the premium, that will be ensuring that the money been spent correctly, and that the report that is on your school website within the time constraints and includes all of those 4 items that I mentioned earlier. Okay, brilliant. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So during an Ofsted inspection, they probably wouldn't specifically ask about the primary this premium anymore. It's something they used to do, but there's been a bit of a shift away from asking, you know, how is the money being spent, to, and they kind of shifted towards how effective is the intent, the implementation, and the impacts of the PE curriculum. So it's a more impactful way of looking, of not being judged, but of supporting schools to work in that area better. So it always relates back to, you've had, you know, the schools have had that premium money, how has it been used, and as a result, what does your PE curriculum now look like? We conduct a study just before lockdown at Active Sussex. We do it annually, and we look at Ofsted reports from the schools in Sussex, and the all 4 areas of the inspection framework from across the Sussex reports included PE and sport in that review. So in terms of behaviour and attitudes, personal development, leadership and management, and quality of education, PE and sport was mentioned within all of them. So it's not just looking at that PE, the subject itself, it's how you've used this premium and how you've used physical activity at your school to improve those other areas as well. And obviously, there is now a deep dive element to the inspection framework, and PE is a subject that inspectors could deep dive into and to look in more detail as to what your provision is at your school. Obviously, in the knowledge that your school has had around £100,000 to spend in this area. And I know Little Common School have had fairly recently a deep dive in PE, so they'll be talking about that a little bit later. Okay, can we go on to the next slide, please? So as a result, really, of the current guidance and the framework, there are sort of three key questions that we put up there that you could be considering for your school. So how effectively do leaders use that primary PE and sport premium? And always remember, when we talk about how effective it is, we always come back to measuring its impact on the outcomes for pupils. So not necessarily the outcomes for the staff, but if staff have received CPD, what has the outcome for pupils been as a result of that? How effectively do governors hold leaders to account? And then finally, are the school's primary PE and sport premium finances correctly managed? Is it being spent on the correct things? Okay, next slide, please. So yeah, if you want any further information or support in this area, because it could almost be a separate webinar in itself, there is a really useful document, which is the links to it there, which is specifically for governors, head teachers and PE subject leaders, which explains the new inspection framework, but in the context of PE, sport and physical activity, and will give you a little bit more information on sort of how PE should be adapted and what questions possibly you could ask as a governor to ensure the PE curriculum is as effective as it could be. Okay, next slide, please. So final task for me, just a couple of more questions there. Again, if you have any questions to put in the question function, please do that now. But something to consider: what has the PE and sport premium been spent on in your school this year? Obviously, it's been quite a different year, and why has it been used that way? And do you know what impact it is having on the pupils at your school this year? Okay, move on to the next slide. So last couple of slides from me. So last section, so what can you do as a governor to assist the spending, monitoring and evaluating of the premium? Next slide. So having spoken to governors and schools, we kind of put together 6 actions that governors could consider taking to support this area. So off the back of this webinar. So number 1 is assign a named governor to oversee the PE and sport premium. Obviously, being on this training, it would make sense for you to do that, having a bit of background knowledge. But yeah, can you as a set of governors, can you assign one person to oversee this area? Second action is to review the information available on your school website. So at the very least, you should see your premium report from the last academic year. Many schools will have an action plan for this year up as well. And it is best practice to keep all of your premium reports on your website. So it might be that you can look back and see historical reports of how the premium has been spent at your school. Third action, ask for a copy of your premium spending plan for this year, so you can see what the intention was for the premium spend this year and how that's being used. Next slide. So last 3 actions, can you meet with your PE leader and discuss the plan and how you as a governor can support its delivery? Action number 5, review regularly and measure impact. So can you use your monitoring activities to help with the process of evidence capture? And that might be something like gaining pupil voice around a certain area, which you could do in your role as a governor. And finally, last action is to ensure that your spending is linked with your school improvement plan. So how can you use the spending to see benefits across your whole school? it could be in terms of behaviour, in terms of attendance, or even in terms of attainment in other areas away from PE. Okay, last slide. So yeah, section 4, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to now hand you over to the safe hands of Linda, who's the head teacher at Little Common Primary School, to explain how they've used their premium and what impact it has had there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. Welcome. Thank you so much for all of you joining us today on this fairly warm lunchtime. I hope it's as lovely where you are in the country as where we are in Bexhill-on-Sea. I'm Linda Appleby, and as Matt introduced me, I've been a head teacher 16 years and here at Little Common for 11. And we're going to tell you a little bit about how the PE and Sport Premium works in our school. If I could have the next slide, I'm handing over to Katie for that one, please.
Hello everybody. So as mentioned in our introduction, we are a large primary school, but we do have limited space, but that hasn't impacted on the success we have here in terms of PE and sport. We have been really successful. Our recent success is becoming a healthy school, and we're looking forward to getting that upgraded to a healthy school with excellence at the end of July. Now, the sports premium funding is a really fundamental part of our success in ability to achieve these awards and our success in PE and sport here at Little Common. Thank you. I'll pass you back to Linda. Next slide, please.
So I hope what's going to come across to you today is we're absolutely passionate about every child living an active and healthy life. And we have 600 examples here at our school of how if you get that right, it really impacts not just on their physical health, but their emotional well-being as well. And you as governors have a vital role to play. Now, David's explained to you about the core functions of the governing body, and I'm sure you're really aware of those. It's so important that you are clear about those as part of the governing body, and we're going to look at how that happens in detail in our school. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, in about May each year, so we just began that a while ago, we start looking at the development of our school the next year in the school development plan, and we're aware of all different subjects and what we might need to work on. So for example, if you are looking around now at what might happen to PE and sport, how does it fit into your school development plan? And you need to make sure that whatever you decide, it's going to have to be sustainable. So really think about the improvements that some of your leaders might be talking to you about and whether that is a sustainable improvement. Once they've worked out what they want to work on and you as governors agree, then it's looking at the implementation angle of that, how can that actually happen, and then the impact, working out the measurements that you'll be taking of those things to know that the impact has actually happened. Next slide, please. Now, there's a very clear difference between the strategic elements and the operational elements of running a school. And as governors, you don't need to get caught up in the tiny detail of things, but you do need to know your core functions in the strategic elements. So in our school, I work out with my leadership team and my subject leaders, what do the developments need to be? And then we take them to the governing body in July and tell them the broad brushstrokes of what we would like them to agree to. And so that, as the governing body, is your vision and strategic direction. Once that's agreed, I spend the time in the summer holidays fleshing that out to the bottom box on that slide. And you are then going to be able to hold me to account for the school development plan that I present to you as governors at the beginning of the year, and we talk it through with our governors once we have fine detail in there. You don't need to worry too much about exactly what plans we've devised to deliver those outcomes, but you do need to be looking at, does it match with what you agreed as a governing body to happen in the school? How it happens is a little bit different, but what happens and whether it actually can be measured with the outcome measures that your head teacher is suggesting, that's the bit for you to worry about. And also keep in mind those 5 key indicators that David mentioned about pupils being really engaged, raising the profile of PE and sport, increasing staff skills, that's huge. Having a really broad range of clubs, it's been difficult in the pandemic, but people are ready to get back to that now. And increasing participation in competitive sport, something that about 20 years ago went slightly out of fashion in primary schools, but is truly back to stay now. Next slide, please. So I'm going to show you the elements of a school development plan from 1920. Now, I've chosen this one rather than the current one due to the pandemic. We wrote that plan right back in the summer of 2019 because we didn't know a pandemic was coming. So the intent that we had on our school development was about the sequential progression of all subjects. And some of you I know will be working in other areas of governance as well in the school, and you've been knowing about developments in the progression in reading, for example, or maths. PE was no different. Also, we needed to make sure that our disadvantaged pupils and our pupils with special educational needs got what they needed to make great progress from their starting points. And we also wanted to develop personal development and make sure that there was a fantastic range of opportunities for our pupils, things that they really wanted to engage with, not what we chose for them. We implemented that through a range of ways. And then as governors, they were looking at the improvements that we had, the impact in the curriculum, which could be seen in lesson observations and monitoring, through the reports from monitoring that subject leaders and the local authority when they visit had done on us, and also Ofsted, and also the data, the quantitative measures which showed the participation and the range of opportunities there. Next slide, please. Katie's going to take over from here and give you some more detail about how this worked.
Thank you, Linda. So as Linda mentioned, the use of the sports premium is linked well to our school improvement plan, and it's really important for us that we offer all children opportunities to take part in competitions and try out a range of different sports. Next slide, please. So let's look at how we use a culture of PE and sport at Little Common to really embed the use of the sports premium. So our aim is to get all children and families following an active and healthy lifestyle. So we do that through 2 hours of PE, active lessons, offering that extensive extracurricular offer. What clubs do we offer children? Looking at competitions and festivals, active play in lunchtimes, and engaging and encouraging families to be active outside of school. And that's really important to us. And that all links back to those sports premium 5 key indicators of how we should be spending our funding and what is best practice. We're going to look at this in more detail. Next slide, please. So if you see here, these are actions across the school day. This is looking at how we embed that culture of PE and sport. You'll see different times and actions of things we do to embed that active and healthy mindset here at Little Common, and how we make really good use of our sports premium funding, and also to make sure that we're achieving those 5 key indicators. So if you look there, you'll see playtimes and lunchtimes of the different activities and things we do, linking back to what David said about challenges as well for children, whether that's small challenges or just personal challenges. Looking at what we offer before and after school, those extracurricular activities, but also looking at how we track children that are inactive and not doing things. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Looking at PE lessons and what we do in terms of the curriculum, but also how we work with families, and families are a really key part of our success here. And also looking back at those competitions and events that we offer in school and outside of school. Next slide, please. Okay, so how has PE and sport been used through a whole school approach here? And that's really important for us to sort of think about what we do for our children. So we track all 600 children. So we look at the activity that they do. Are they active inside and outside of school? Whether they're leaders, whether they take part in competitions, what they do in terms of swimming. This gives us really important information for teachers to use, but for myself as a PE lead as well, that we can use to focus our spending of the sports premium and to ensure that we have impact. Next slide, please. So here we start to see more evidence of how we use the sports premium funding and how we create a whole school approach. So you'll see lots of different areas that we look at there, from school staff, all school staff, from parents and the outside community, and what we do for children in terms of them than being leaders within school. Being leaders is a really important aspect of developing children within PE and sport. And staff CPD, David mentioned there about staff CPD. We're really lucky here. All our staff teach PE, and that's really important to us. And it was something that was highlighted by Ofsted as well, that we're giving our staff that confidence to be able to teach, but also showing sustainable use of the sports premium going forward, and they can use that to help support children in the future as well. Next slide, please. So we're really proud of what we offer our families here. Get active challenges and things that they can do outside of school, and really ensuring that they are engaged in physical activity and understanding about what keeps them healthy. The sports premium gives us a great opportunity to promote and reward children and their families, and ensuring that they're embedding those healthy and active lifestyle habits. And we talk about habits because that's something that we want them to sustain long term. These photos really show the impact of embedding physical activity at the heart of what we do here. Next slide, please. Okay, so what you'll see here is what we do in terms of the sports premium report. So at the end of each year, what I do here, I've just got something come up on my screen. I just click off that. So what I do at the end of each year is I put together a finalised report, and I produce an impact report that gets sent to all our stakeholders, so they can see actually what are we doing in terms of our sports premium funding and what the impact of that has been, rather than looking at the whole of the report. And we're going to look at that in a little bit more detail. Next slide, please. So what has been the impact at Little Common in terms of PE and the wider community? So we go back to the intent, the implementation, the impact and the sustainability. So if we think here, what was our intent? Our intent here was to look at activity across the school, ensuring that all children were active. And if we think back to what Linda was mentioning about our SEN and our disadvantaged children, and again to what David was talking about in terms of all children being active, we can see that up to March last year, so before the just before the pandemic, 93% of our school were active, and I wanted to ensure that actually we get 100% of our children being active, because that is our aim. So when children were here during lockdown, we looked at the children that were participating to ensure that they were being active, and I can tell you now that up to 99% of those children were active. So we are ensuring that we are achieving what our intent was on that. Next slide, please. So getting active and being healthy. So our intent was, again, engaging all pupils in 60 minutes of physical activity every day. How do we do that? So how are we going to implement that? So we look at active playtimes, active lunchtimes, active lessons, extracurricular offer that we put in place for children. And spending money on equipment is a really important part of that, thinking about what equipment we need and actually how are we going to engage those children in physical activity. What is the impact of that? The impact is that 98% of our children are active, or if we look at our playtimes, we know that all children are currently being active every play and every lunchtime. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so what has the impact been during school closures? And that is really important now more than ever, to see actually what is the impact of our spending now for our children. So we can start to see here, our intent was, how are we going to get all children active whilst they're at home? What are we going to do? How are we going to use our spending, our funding, to be able to ensure that that happens? So things such as healthy lifestyle challenges, creating get active at home videos, thinking about parent questionnaires, pupil questionnaires. Pupil voice is something that's very key in terms of understanding and knowing what the children want and what they're doing. And from this, we can see that nearly 93% of our children were active at home during school closures, and that's something that we're really proud of. Next slide, please. So yeah, being a play lead is as good as you can lead games and encourage everyone to be active. We are proud that we have over 200 children being leaders in playtimes and lunchtime activities. They're taking responsibility for encouraging and promoting activity for all children. Next slide, please. So governor expectations, how is this report overseen? So I expect twice yearly check-ins from my governor to have those professional conversations. I want them to question me and ask me, what am I doing with that spending? What is the impact of that? I want the governor to ask me, what are the aims for this year and where are you with this? Can I help you? Is there anything that I can put in place or support you with? Should we have a look at some lesson observations and how your staff doing in terms of the teaching of PE? I produce a termly governor and head report, which I send to my governor and I send to Linda, which goes through some of my targets, my aims for the year and how we're getting on with that. And I think the regular updates are really important for my governor if they can't always get into school, and for them to be aware of what's going on at present and in the future, and where we're going with that. So next slide, please. So this is an example. It looks a little bit overwhelming on the screen. There's lots of information on there. So this is an example of the termly PE and report that I send to governors. Now, for me, this is best practice. It wouldn't be something that you would necessarily expect from all PE leads. I am an experienced PE lead, so that's something that I do for my governor and my head, so that everyone is aware of what's going on in terms of PE, sport and health at Little Common. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Katie. You can see Katie's passion for PE and sport come across, and it comes out throughout our entire school. Now, we had an Ofsted inspection just before the pandemic, and then we also had a pilot inspection as well, which was just after Easter this year. So we've had two experiences of PE deep dives, and I just want to talk you through it in brief, in case that's something that you know is on the horizon for you. So when the head teacher receives the Ofsted phone call from the lead inspector to say that they're coming for the next day or 2 days, depending on whether you're a Section 5 or a Section 8 inspection, one of the things that will be negotiated in that call is which subjects will have a deep dive, and there'll be 3 to 5 subjects chosen for a deep dive. Now that is a negotiation. Do reassure your head teacher that they do have a say in that, and a balance of subjects will be chosen. And quite often PE is something, or art or music, which makes a really good counterbalance to looking at the academic subjects such as maths, English, science. So it's a good one, we feel, to choose to show off what you do in your school. After that phone call, when the head teacher will explain their protocols and their philosophy for PE at their school, then the Ofsted inspector will probably already have looked at the Sport Premium report on the website, and at some point over the inspection will have a discussion with you, the governors. Also going on will be the subject deep dive in the school building. The subject leader will meet with the inspector before the deep dive happens, and together the inspector will invite the subject leader to join them to do the deep dive and tour the school, looking at how PE is delivered and received by children across the school. After those lessons, the inspector will speak to the teachers they saw and also speak to some children across the school. Also, PE is covered in some elements in the parent questionnaire, so your stakeholders get a chance to give their views and feedback to Ofsted in that way. And all of those things come together in the beginnings of the judgments. Next slide, please. The Ofsted judgment is made up of those 5 areas, as David was telling you, and the quality of education is where you might think PE really sits. But as David said, the leadership of your senior leaders, and as you as governors with responsibility for the spending of the PE and sport premium, but also your subject leader as well, that comes into judgment for leadership and management. In early years, you're looking at, how does PE begin? How does your school make sure that children have the best start to lead active lives throughout their time at school and beyond, finding passions that will carry them forward to have a really physical and active lifestyle when they're adults as well. Behaviour and attitudes talks about attendance, conduct, resilience, and confidence, all those things that we see so much in PE and sport. And personal development is very much about that offer that you make to your children in your school. What things are available for them? And right at the moment, it's not so much about what you might have delivered right now as a school. It's about what was on offer for children before the pandemic, What limited offer have you managed during the pandemic? And what's your plan to return to a wider offer once the COVID restrictions end? Next slide, please. In a nutshell, that's us. But one thing I just wanted to mention to you, we were looking for NQTs recently, and I was really surprised when I met with about 30 different candidates in an informal interview, touring around the outside of our school, how very few had had much experience of teaching PE in their placements. I was amazed. What most of them told me is that sports coaches were employed in their schools, so they hadn't had the opportunity. So right now, if I had one wish for PE in schools, it would be that in every school where teachers teach PE, whoever they are, that they get great training and support to deliver outstanding PE consistently to children every day. It'll change their lives. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Linda, Katie, and David. Well, an awful lot to digest there, and unbelievably, we actually got through a lot of it in the right time frame. So thank you so much. The question section has been very vibrant, which is fabulous here. So yeah, if we can run through some of those right now. The most common, most pressing, I'll probably aim at David. A lot of talk about swimming and how that specifically relates to the reporting requirements happening at the minute. Clearly, pools have been closed. How does one therefore report on progress made about pupils, say, for instance, being able to swim 25 meters?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no. So in that regard, this year, the Department for Education are very aware of the issues schools have had. For that section, they would like you, so it's specifically for your year 6 leaving this year, they would like you to put down what you know currently those year 6s can do. So that might be if they swam in year 4, where they were when they finished swimming in year 4. So you could put that data in your list. But wherever you put data in, if it's not completely up to date, then just note that on your premium report. State that this data was taken, these statistics were taken after swimming provision in year 4, for example. If you don't know, then just put just mention that in your report. Say you don't know where they are at the moment, and explain why you don't know. So it might be you haven't been able to access swimming for the last 2 years because your local swimming pool has been closed. It might be as simple as that. So as long as you mention why you haven't got that data, then that's absolutely fine. But if you do have any data at all, then just include in your report what you do know and at what point that data was taken. It could be that you speak to parents to find out a little bit more about where their pupils are at this current point, but it's perfectly fine to just go from the latest data set that you've got.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. We have a question from Mariana. I'll probably come to you with this, Linda. Will parents have a knowledge of how this money is being spent, or is it specifically only for school purposes? And I want to relate that to another question to do with parents. They seem very involved in your school, in the approach you're taking. How did you go about bringing them on board initially?
I'll do the first bit and I'll ask Katie to do the second bit if you don't mind. So the first bit, because your sport premium is on your website, and please feel free to look all over our website. You'll see a variety of things about PE and sport on our website, including newly our Get Active newsletter, which is now so popular we run it as its own newsletter on top of our school one. So parents are aware of what's on the sport premium, and we do have some parents who sometimes challenge us over things if they feel that something is lacking in the school, but we always take on board any challenge as a positive, because people are engaging with us and it means they're excited about something, and it's fantastic. It gives us a bit of a spur to provide even more. Katie, perhaps you could explain how we got our parents engaged.
We get our parents engaged by sending out letters or within the newsletter as well. So anything that we do, we inform parents. So any spending that we use, for example, we've just created some new outside playground markings for the year 1 children. We tell the parents about that. So we tell them how we use our spending, and we also share that with our impact report at the end of the year as well. So we talk a lot about what we do and how we spend that money, and keeping them engaged is very important within that as well.
Fabulous. Back to you, I think, David. From Deborah, can you give examples of capital projects that would not be covered by this particular funding?
Well, it's tricky, as I said, because that capitalisation policy is set by your school, but things that are quite obvious would be perhaps you've got a swimming pool that needs the roof fixing. That wouldn't be obviously part of the premium, that would be part of your capital budget. So things, yeah, things that large scale things that need repairing would fall under that capital area. But it's really key to check with your school as to what falls in it and what doesn't. So there are things that some schools would allow and some schools wouldn't. So but yeah, if you think about those large sort of repair work jobs, then they're the obvious ones that wouldn't be allowed. I hope that helps.
Not always immediately obvious. Back to you, I think, as well, David, for this one. There are a couple different questions on, say, the next year, maybe 2 years. Do you have any sense of where this premium funding is going? Is it secure for the time being, or are they likely to change?
Yeah, no, we don't know yet what's going to happen for next academic year. So the premium has been in place since the 2013-14 academic year. Normally we'll find out around this time as to whether it's going to continue. There is sort of growing pressure on the government to announce that, but obviously it costs the government £320 million every year, so it's quite given the current circumstances, quite a large amount of money to find. So no, unfortunately we don't know, which is why it's really important to make sure that your spending is as sustainable as possible. So if it does stop, those benefits to pupils will carry on.
Thank you. For you, Linda, you mentioned active learning being a part of your structure. How easy was this to install, and what effect did it have in the classrooms? And would you recommend spending funding like this on support to adopt active learning?
Absolutely, I would. And in a moment, I'll also let Katie talk about it. But it is about building a culture. And I think, as I mentioned, if you have a school where maybe your teachers aren't used to teaching PE, it would be much harder to get that culture. Our teachers don't often run clubs. They're busy doing a lot of other things, and particularly in their lunchtimes, they need a break. I need a sustainable workforce who are well rested, but they're very up for doing things within the teaching time. And so Katie enthuses people well, as you can tell, and she knows she's got the full backing of the leadership team. So Katie, do you want to explain a bit?
So in terms of getting having active lessons, we look at actually the lessons that people are doing. So it could be something in between a lesson where children are doing something like a Go Noodle activity. It could be something where they're having an active maths lesson. And we also want to make sure that we're not taking away the quality of the lesson that they're teaching as well. And that's really important. So you're sitting PE alongside the quality of the other lessons as well. So we're very good at having a whole school get active in terms of which class is the most active. So the activity within the day, so we use Go Noodle for that, and that's always really effective because classes are battling now to be the active class of the term. We also think about actually how we're embedding challenges and things within sessions. So it could be that we have personal challenges that children will do, so little 30-second activities where they're doing something to get moving and being active within the session. So it doesn't have to be something that takes a long time. It can just be little snippets of activity where the children are just getting their heart rate up a little bit, but not also taking away the focus of the learning within the main session as well, whether that's maths or English. And you need to also take into account the class and the cohort that you have as well, and that's also key.
Wonderful. Got a very nice comment from John. My school is developing a creative arts curriculum, which also includes dance, drama, and PE. So the impact on WSI is great. So that is fabulous to hear. Thank you, John. For you, David, there have been a few questions about external suppliers. What should schools be looking for when considering using external suppliers to provide or bolster sport and PE at the school?
To use the same sort of vetting procedures you would use for any member of staff that you'd be hiring, really. So you want to see obviously that they're confident and competent at teaching whatever you are asking them to do. and that if you're using obviously your premium for it, how is what they're providing fitted in with those 5 key indicators, and how is what they're providing going to be sustainable for the future. There are certain standards which I'm happy to share with you, which I couldn't call off the top of my head right now, is that that coaches working in schools should adhere to, as in terms of best practice. And there is so there is national sort of levels and expectations of coaches that work within primary schools that they should have. A minimum of if you're coaching a specific sport, it should be a minimum of a level 2 coaching qualification in that sport. But really, it's that it would be for your school to look at what they can provide, not in addition to obviously what you would normally have as either an interview. But I would treat it the same as if you were hiring a teacher to teach in a class. There is a lot of coaching companies, there's a lot of providers out there, so you can expect the very best really for the pupils in your school.
Can I just add something to that as well? And I think
Please do, Katie.
If you're getting coaches to come in as well, and I think best practice as well is for coaches to really understand what else is going on around the school as well, to really embed that culture of PE and sport, rather than having PE as a separate side subject. You want to try and embed PE across the whole school. So when you're looking at hiring coaches, think about how they possibly could do that as well, to make sure that you're getting the most out of them and you're really making sure you've got that culture of PE and sport within your school as well.
Fabulous. Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time, and thank you to everyone who did ask questions and participate in that. I'm sorry we didn't have time to get to all of them, but we've covered a heck of a lot of ground today, and thank you for your participation. I hope you gained a tremendous amount from it, and our huge gratitude and thanks to Linda, Katie, and David for giving up their time today to come and speak to us. Please do keep an eye out for the link that we'll be sharing for the video and the slides. Those will be available. And please do participate in the survey afterwards if you have any comments or feedback for us. It's always appreciated. And enjoy the rest of the day, and best of luck in your school, hopefully improving physical well-being, because as I hope we're helping point out, it is and should be a very crucial part of what we're delivering for young people. So thank you again. And goodbye.
Okay.
Bye.